All right. Hello, everyone. We're just going to take a few minutes to wait for a few other people to log on, and then we will begin. All right, we're going to start our webinar. So hello and welcome to this evening's webinar, Love in the Time of COVID. Our presenters today are Sarah Scatero and Tori Legowski. Sarah currently serves as the Director of Business Development at THIRA Health after spending a year as Clinical Director. And Tori has a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and is a therapist at THIRA Health, which brings you today's presentation. THIRA Health is a mental health facility in downtown Bellevue that specializes in partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient programs for women, teen girls, and female-aligned individuals. THIRA's treatment programs are grounded in a foundation of dialectical behavior therapy, which is a well-researched and highly effective treatment for those who are at a high risk of suicide, engage in self-harm, or suffer from other complex problems such as eating disorders, anxiety, depression, and more. For more information about THIRA Health and its treatment options, please visit www.thirahealth.com. A few bookkeeping notes. Today's presentation is being recorded, and this will be available on the THIRA Health website in a few days. You will receive an email with a link on the recording when it is available. During the presentation, all audience microphones will be muted and cameras will be turned off. At the conclusion of the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask your question. You may submit questions at any time, but all will be held until the end of the presentation. We will try to answer as many as we can in the time allotted. Thank you again for your interest in today's presentation. I'll now turn it over to our two presenters.
Thank you so much. I will go first. So I am Sarah Scatero and really looking forward to enjoying this time, giving a tiny tidbit of information on this topic, which in real life we could probably spend hours discussing, and look very, very much forward to questions at the end. I have been very fortunate to be working in the field of mental health and behavioral health for 32 years and really enjoy this opportunity to partner with my colleague Tori and have a lot of fun and hopefully share some solid information that you'll find useful for this evening. And Tori, you get to go next.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tori. I'm one of the therapists here at THIRA, and I have been doing therapy for about 7 years now. My background is in couples and family therapy, so relationship dynamics is kind of what I was originally trained in, and I'm hoping that people will find this information helpful or will find it to be applicable for themselves, either in their family context or in a romantic context. So we can get started.
All right, I'm going to talk about our 3 objectives. Maybe we'll have more, but clearly we want to give an opportunity to recognize and acknowledge and really respect some of the challenges and problems in relationships as they're unfolding during this pandemic. And surely we've all faced challenges before, but COVID and the resulting restrictions and constrictions have presented ample opportunities to find some of our harder spots to converse and reverse our relationships as time has unfolded in the last 2 years. We tonight want to be able to help you increase your understanding of how this dynamic that's overarching and really reaching every member of the globe may have impacted you in your relationships, including your relationship with yourself. And then we want to end on a high note of finding some ways to keep momentum and positivity and regeneration going throughout all of your relationship journeys. No easy feat for sure, but we hope that we can impart some opportunities to talk about this as well as wisdom and glean some ideas from you as well. So welcome.
All right, and I feel like none of this information will be particularly new for those of you who are joining us, but like, what has COVID done? What are we seeing? The fact is, like, safer at home measures and like continued restrictions on being able to actually spend the time with our loved ones in the way that we are used to. So we're either being forced to spend more time together because we're both working from home, or we're not able to engage in things outside of the home that we used to, or we're now in the opposite direction, and those of us who live alone, or those of us who are separated from family members or significant others, may not be seeing them at all, in terms of not being able to travel, or having too much of a contagion risk, things like that. So we're either feeling too close together, or on the other opposite end of the spectrum, way too far apart. And for a lot of us, our usual coping skills just aren't there anymore. If you used to really like to go dancing or go to live music as part of your way to have some catharsis and get things out, we haven't been able to do things like that. If, spending time in a coffee shop, alone with a book was part of your self-care, it's not available for everyone anymore. So that idea of not only are we facing all of these challenges, the things that we used to do that we know work for us aren't always available in the way that they used to be. And then there's the overall sense of not knowing what's going to happen next. As humans, we don't like uncertainty. We don't like when we're not sure what's going to happen next, when we're sitting in uncertainty. We like the answer. Even if it's a negative answer, it feels a little bit more comfortable because we know what to do next. When we sit in a place where we're not sure what's going to happen next, so we don't know how to prepare, it makes us just more anxious on a larger scale. So sitting in this space of anxiety, in this space of uncertainty for what has been years, is increasing our kind of overall sense of anxiety and reducing our ability to tolerate uncertainty in all of the other parts of our lives, or tolerate kind of change in other parts of our lives. And then finally, again, no surprise, or not going to be new information for people, but that idea of kids being home doing school virtually, family members being home working virtually, and everybody being kind of constantly in the same space has made it so much harder to create really solid boundaries between work and home, as well as boundaries between alone time, together time, balancing things like childcare and all of those different things. And our experiences working from home have now I am doing childcare and housework and work all at the same time. So being not having those strong boundaries means that a lot of us are feeling more pressure to be more available at work. A lot of us are feeling, just the higher pressure of having much more to do in the same amount of time that we used to do, not have so many demands on us. So all of these things, are making everything a little bit harder. And especially those who are now kind of dealing with, how do I deal with the boundaries between me and work, as well as the boundaries between me and my significant other, or me and my parents, me and my kids.
Right. So, Tori, you're going to laugh because you were just telling me this story the other day, that maybe the one spot that we haven't heard so much stress production about is with pets. People and pets seem to really be doing well with the closeness. And That's a sweet spot for sure. But we also really want to do a bow of respect to defining a little more clearly what we are discussing as relationship stress. So on this slide, you'll see that relationships that we may have relied on, they were a reflection of a reality for us, have become stressful, or they've experienced stress, much like what Tori just referenced. That distance, there's a truth to the saying that absence makes the heart grow fonder. There is something that happens neurologically for us when our people that we like are away from us, and we get that experience of welcoming them back, welcoming them back into the house or back into the greeting or the meeting that we get to have with them. Some of that's been either stripped away or it's been compressed so that we, as Tori mentioned, are with them all the time. We don't have that actual relief valve. And this causes what I would call a very quiet, really subtle form of stress that for a lot of folks that we've had the opportunity to sit with and listen to have said is accumulating over time. Maybe the first 6 months weren't necessarily focused on the relationship stress, was the external stress, but then this very part of our life that usually would give us comfort and some relief has become part of what is stressful as well. So in our second bullet, we want to talk about if we were in relationships that were, as all relationships will do, go through up and down periods. If we were in one of those valleys, so to speak, of struggling, this was an opportunity for that to become heightened or exacerbated or made worse. We didn't have time or opportunity to stretch out, pause moments, even taking time moments, even privacy and boundary moments to manage the struggle. So we're in the middle of this struggle without much of a relief valve close at hand. And that is a much more apparent level of stress for most people that we've sat with and talked with and have told us what their experience has been like. So if that's true for you, you might want to think about a question you could ask us. We've had some amazing tips from people about what they've done. The third bulletin is about financial stress. Obviously, some people had to change what was going on with their economics, whether that was caring for more people, not having access to a way to generate great sort of financial support, and really budgeting and managing all of the things that changed. If you were one of those fortunate people that had a pattern of managing whatever level of finance you had, this may have been the last 2 years a blow up. And that, of course, we know has a big impact. Whether you're a teenager or you're a grandparent or you're working 2 jobs, it has a big impact on how we feel stable, how we feel like we're able to contribute to the people we care about, and how, like Tori mentioned just a while ago, how we're able to plan for how am I going to pay this bill? How am I going to make ends meet? So really we want to recognize that that stressor is insidious and really impacts lots of people across different age and developmental stages. Sometimes when we have lots of stress, a way that human beings, and myself included, is I try to get more control. When I feel stressed, it's out of control. So I want to do things and manage things, whether that's organizing things, tasking things, communicating things that are going to bring my stress level down. The irony is that sometimes that increases stress for other people. Maybe it even in the short term makes me feel like I'm having less stress, but in my relationships, it's accumulating one small moment after the next small moment of increased stress. So control and routine, vital words. We like that. We like habits. We like to be able to predict when and how things are going to happen. some of that went flying right out the window during the last 2 years for many people. And this increased need for control can make us really vulnerable to not being very kind or attuned or awake and aware to other people around us. So we are a little spicier, a little shorter tempered, and maybe a tad bit or a lot bit more reactive. And that has a contagion effect. We know that emotions, we talk about this in THIRA, emotions are contagious. So if I'm really stressed and uptight and angry and edgy because I'm actually a little afraid and a little worried, I'm sharing that with everyone around me. And generally, it doesn't make people sit back and have a lot of joy. So we're going to try to roll through some of those topics, invite you to think about some of those as we go through this short amount of time we have together, and we'll get to some great questions at the end. So there you go.
All right, so this is going to be our little nod to DBT. THIRA is a DBT program, dialectical behavioral therapy. And so the one big concept we wanted to bring in from DBT is the concept of dialectics, which is the idea of two kind of opposing ideas, both being true at the same time, and being able to hold those things in balance. Things like, I'm really strong and independent and I need help right now. Or, this is really important to me and it's going to be really hard. And neither one of those ideas negates the other. So the idea of making sure that we're finding a solid middle ground in both of those kind of like opposing forces or opposing sides. And so there are many dialectics that we hold in general in most relationships. And there's lots of them that have been put out of balance with all of the stress that we've already discussed. So the first one, which, we have mentioned kind of multiple times, that forced either together or apart, is this balance between connection and autonomy. So like this idea of like together time and alone time. If you are an introvert, you're like, a lot of us, our alone time is suddenly almost non-existent. For people who genuinely crave connection and find that to be the most restorative to them, suddenly don't have access to things that they always did to really keep themselves energized and keep that connection. So being able to find a solid balance between those two sides of ourselves, because we all need connection and we all need alone time, and being able to find what that balance looks like for us, as well as what does that balance look like for our partners, for our families, for other people that are living in our spaces. And can we find a balance between if those two things look a little different? Our needs for ourselves versus the needs of others. That I think this is something that I've seen, especially with parents, and especially with parents who have had kids who are learning virtually. That idea of like, I need to get this done. I need to do this work. I need to, whether it's housework, whether it's, a billing report, that like, I need to do this. And my kid is sitting across from me telling me they can't get into the link, or they can't get whatever homework that they are supposed to be doing. That idea of like, how do we find the space where like the things I need to do, the things that I need for myself to be happy, healthy, sane, all of those things, and the needs of of the people around me, and the needs that I need to help to fulfill for those people. And how do I find a good balance where I am helping to fulfill those needs without completely draining myself, and making sure that I'm requesting what it is that I need from others, and not only, giving of myself without also making sure that I am being restored. Boundaries between work and home, like we said, when you're working from home, suddenly you are theoretically almost always available. So a lot of the lines that have been like, when I leave the office, like I'm no longer available, or like I'm harder to get. But if my house is my office, like being able to set up those boundaries can be harder. And we also have some really strong like psychological boundaries that we put between home and work. Our commute home, for most of us, is part of that transition between I am my work self, I am the self that is the most productive, all of those things, into a space where like I am now maybe more nurturing. I am now this other, like this person that I am at home. And without kind of that solid transition of like I am now going from one to the other, it can feel like those lines are blurred. It can feel like I am constantly in my workspace. And if my workspace is stressful to me, and my workspace is also my bed, like, how am I relaxing and feeling comfortable during those hours when I'm not working? And then finally, this idea of like planning for the future and realizing that some of those plans may not, in fact, be able to go through. So, like, this idea of having this uncertainty. And a lot of us have really struggled to find a space of like, well, I feel like maybe I can't plan anything because nothing, like everything just feels so up in the air. But then we feel like we don't have long-term goals and we're not working towards things. And that gives us this sense of kind of aimlessness versus this idea of, if I plan for things and I'm really set on them, if they don't happen, things do change, things get canceled, things aren't able to go through, I'm devastated. And finding that balance of like, can I still be working towards something? Can I still have some goals or like some plans for the future? Can I still have a vacation I might look forward to? Things like that. And can I bring in some adaptability of like, if it has to change, if it has to be canceled, if something needs to be different, I can still move forward.
Tori, I'm so appreciative of you saying what you just said, and I was thinking about the stories we've also heard in the last year to 2 years of people really having uncertainty about having a job. I mean, I think it's woven and it's probably for many people just obvious, but a lot of people have had uncertainty about, am I going to have my job? My job is changing. Now I was sick and I'm not at my job. What's going on? It's really super stressful. So I'm really appreciative of you weaving that in there. Thank you, friend.
Absolutely. And so this idea of like all of these things are out of balance, what do we do with that? And one of the biggest things that we can do to alleviate a lot of, especially stuff around boundaries, is communicate more than we think we need to. Because one of the things that we do as humans is assume that everyone already knows what we're thinking, because we tend to think that other people are thinking what we're thinking. So if they're thinking what I'm thinking, they already know what I'm thinking. I don't have to communicate it. So we aren't always as clear as we need to be. So communicating with work, like these are like, do I have set hours? Can I set them? Like, can I put like even settings around like when I'm available by phone, when I am available by email, like can I turn certain things to do not disturb after my workday is done? To give yourself a little bit of space of like, even if you're not expected to answer, if your phone is pinging with things that work needs from you, how good are you at being able to set those boundaries and being like that? It's Saturday, it's my day off. I'm not going to respond to that. And being able to kind of like put more things in place to make sure that like you're having some of that transition time. This might also mean like setting up like, if I'm working like from my couch, is it a specific part of my couch? Is it always that I like have a specific like always putting on work clothes, things like that, to like give yourself some like part of your day that indicates for you that this is work time. And once I'm done with this, once I move away from that spot, once I have changed back into some like more comfortable clothes, things like that, that now indicates that I am home and I'm no longer in my workspace and I don't have to like hold on to whatever stress is happening in that day.
I guess if I was your person, then I'd be also knowing that's a clear indication to me that now you're ready to be with me.
Absolutely.
You told me I had to leave you alone while you're doing that, but now you're ready to watch TV with me, or we can go for a walk together. I like what you just said. Thank you.
And like that plays into this next part about like, and also communicating about those personal boundaries. If you've got a thing of like, when I'm in this spot, like this is my work spot. When I'm in the work clothes, that is my work time. Communicating that to your partner, like, hey, this is the work time. Like, don't bother me here because I've got a lot of stuff to get done, or I like, and the second I'm out of that spot, like then I can absolutely dedicate my time and attention to you. And what, like, do I need alone time? Do I need a transition time between work and home? Like, can I be like, okay, so I'm changing my clothes and I need a half hour to just decompress because I've had this day and I need to just like give myself some time to be able to rest and be able to like settle so that I can be more engaged once I'm actually spending that time and that attention with you. And then finally, this also involves us needing to know what it is that we do need. So a lot of this is also self-reflection and self-knowledge. So like, how do I feel loved? What is it that I like use or need that makes me understand that this person appreciates me, this person cares about me, this person loves me? And how do I recharge? Am I an introvert? Do I need that alone time because that feels restorative to me? Am I an extrovert where I absolutely need to be making sure that I'm making those social connections more often because that is the thing that I find to be recharging, and alone time for me just feels really draining? And then that idea of like, if I am in a conflict, if I am having an elevated moment where I'm feeling really upset or I'm feeling really emotional, what are my instincts and what do I need? Am I someone who if I'm in fight or flight, am I a flight person? Do I need some space? Am I someone who like needs that connection because I don't like that space? So that idea of knowing for ourselves when things are elevated, what makes me feel secure and what makes me feel like this is something that I can continue to do moving forward. And being able to let others know. Because one, we need to know first, because we can't tell anyone anything about ourselves that we don't already know. And two, once we figured that out, being like, hey, I need that alone recharge time. Or hey, I definitely need to be making more of a connection. Or like, I'm feeling really elevated and I need to take maybe 10 minutes to just like be by myself and calm down. And I will come right back. Or when I'm feeling really elevated, it's really hard for me to communicate verbally. So I'm going to write some stuff down and come back. That idea of what is it that I need and how can I make sure that the people that I am interacting with know and understand what that looks like. And on the flip side, making sure I'm then checking in on the opposite end. What is it that you need? What is it that you would expect? Because we need to communicate about these things before they actually happen. Because once we're already in an elevated space, we're not good at telling people that, hey, I need 10 minutes. But if we've talked about it beforehand and we'd be like, hey, remember when we were both really calm and totally in charge of ourselves? And we talked about the fact that I'm going to need a little bit of time if we're having a more heated argument. Like, we've already talked about it and we can already kind of go there, but we don't communicate well. The second our emotions rise, we lose our ability to communicate effectively. So making sure that we're communicating about these things before we need to. And then, all right, so this is the other side of this of like, so setting strong boundaries about work time and home time. Again, what does that look like for you specifically? Does that mean having a really solid transition? Some people have also talked about the idea of like, I literally leave my house, walk around the block and come back in to give my brain that little commute, that like moment of I'm leaving and I'm coming back. Does that mean changing clothes? Does that mean, texting someone the second I get home of like, I officially like this counts as home time? What is it that I can do to set those boundaries for myself, to like mentally set those boundaries, and then set those boundaries for others that are interacting with me as well? Knowing what recharges you, your partner, communicating about it, ask, and like letting them know like, hey, I'm noticing myself being a little bit more snippy. I'm noticing myself kind of feeling a little bit more elevated. I think I just need a couple of hours by myself. I just need to like have some alone time. And being able to be like, hey, you seem like you could use some alone time. Do you think that's accurate? That checking in of like, this seems like something that you said you needed and we haven't been able to do. Is that something you need now? Can be very preventative in kind of keeping things from escalating further. Find what engages you. So if you're someone who your catharsis, your things that you really love to do to let out some steam are not available for you, what are other ways that you can genuinely engage in anything in your home? Like, Are you one of the people who picked up baking while you've been at home? Are you someone who's like gotten really into a TV show? All of these things can still be restorative, even if they are very different from the things that restored you before. So it's about trying things that you think you might enjoy and allowing yourself to take time to do things solely because you enjoy them and solely because they give you some sense of restoration and some sense of joy. And then finally, allowing yourself to have flexibility in your planning, giving yourself the like, okay, if this happens, I'm going to do this. If it doesn't happen, can I do this? Like giving yourself a chance to really practice some of that flexibility and starting, which this will be on a takeaway slide further down the line, but starting yourself to like practice little pieces of change within your normal routine to get yourself more comfortable with change in general. All right. On to
I
you.
like what you're saying. We have so much passion about this because I think both of us have had these experiences of listening to people where they've had some successes and their journey to that success has been fraught and filled with lots of stumbling, which should be what we all give a little gentleness to each other, as we think about our relationship with self and then our relationship and how complex that is with another human being or several human beings in your family or in your household. We have a little bit of time this evening, but not all the time we'd like to have, because we think about the families we've met where there's multi-generations in the same household, and the needs are really complicated and really different for everybody. So in this piece of this discussion, we're talking about ways to turn toward. This is a very much a Gottman Institute phrase of like turning toward and being connected with each other and with what's a priority and what's good for ourselves. So I'll take a shot at a couple of them, Tori, and you can take a shot at them. But how do I really show appreciation and respect and what is in my household value to others that are around me? How do I make it very clear? And you can't walk around every minute of every day doing this, but how do I take a pause and really show that I appreciate what somebody's done? How do I make the moments that can be filled with chaos and stress and uncertainty and worry, how can I make them count? How can I turn toward my person, really slow it down and let them know that I see them and that I hear them? And this is the combination pack of appreciate them, right? So if I was going to give tips today, it would be to literally, in all the things we've talked about, to also find a way to stop. As much as that's to slow my neurobiology down, slow my thinking down, slow my emotions down, it's so I can authentically and noticeably connect with the person I need to let know that I see them, that I hear them. Doesn't mean I agree exactly 100% with them, but I'm appreciating them and I'm really all the way in to this moment with them. And then I probably can spend a little time reflecting, or as Tori suggested, maybe even writing down, do I even have clarity about what it is that my love partner or my family member, do I really know what it is they need to receive to feel appreciated? I want them to feel appreciated. I know it helps us bond, it helps us manage together and move forward into uncertainty better to feel appreciated. Am I super clear about that? I know Tori's going to maybe touch on that a little bit about some different resources that she has to share of how we know each other's love languages, right? How do I seal the deal in a way that makes sense to them so I know that when I give it, that they're able to pick up what I'm putting down. Tori, I'll let you take the last two bullets then.
Sure. So one, Sarah mentioned, so love languages in general, the book, can be very problematic in some ways. It's very heteronormative. It has a lot of really stereotyped gender roles. And their website has a really good quiz and has a lot of really concrete, like actionable information of like, okay, if your love language is this, here are a bunch of things that might feel good for you. If your love language is this, or if your partner's love language is this, here's a bunch of things that might feel really restorative for them, especially if you have a mismatch. So you might be like, I don't even know how to do that, because to me that would not feel like, it would feel fake or it would feel phony. So it gives a lot of really good concrete info. Also, if you're thinking in terms of family members, there's a really good one. They also have a quiz that's love languages for teens that I would highly recommend parents and teens reflect on, because it can be really helpful to know, like, you know, if I want my teen to know that I care about them, which I do, sometimes they can feel really resistant to that. So at least if I'm going in knowing that this is the framework they like to feel appreciated in, maybe I'm a little bit more likely to hit the mark.
And then,
Um,
and Tori, is that
mhm,
the one you were telling me about earlier? It's called the Five Love Languages.
mhm.
It's a Chapman. The guy's last name is Chapman, Gary Chapman, right?
Yes.
Yes,
And
gotcha.
yeah, literally you can just Google five love languages. It'll go straight to his site. He's got a ton of free information on his website. It's really easily available. So if the idea of like, how do I show appreciation or how do I receive appreciation feels like I have no idea, I would absolutely recommend, like, that's a really good place to start. Um, and then the other idea is, how often are we showing and expressing our appreciation with others? This idea of, especially around like parents and children, or if there's any sort of conflict or any problems that are going on in any kind of dynamic, we end up where our entire relationship or our entire existence with that person ends up becoming about this thing, or be like, we only ever talk about it, even if we're talking about how it's improving, or even if we're talking about like how to get better at it or what we need to do, it still becomes this. So especially if we're talking about kids or our parents, this idea of like talking to them just about anything, like, what are you reading, what are you enjoying, do you like, what do you like to watch, this idea of making sure that we're having these basic human connections that are not just how are you doing at school, what's going on, like all like focused on kind of the things that could be problems, and really just being like what do you do, like what did you do today, did you have anything that you did that was fun, do you like, what do you watch on Netflix, things of like just having those fun conversations there that don't have this pressure to them, to make sure that we're connecting outside of this idea of like forced connection. And then this idea of, which this is an idiom, I stole it from Gretchen Rubin, so I cannot take credit for it, but this idea of what we do daily matters so much more than one-time expressions. So pop culture has told us that one-time grand gesture is enough for romance, is enough for like a person to fall in love, all of those things. Those things are great, and if that happens once and then you never feel appreciated again, that's not going to matter nearly as much as like daily small moments of connection. So just making sure that we're taking a moment, because we can feel like the people in our households are just ships that are passing by us, that we're just kind of functioning as independent units all in the same household, and just taking that moment to make sure that we're connecting over anything, to have a daily sense of like of connection and unity. All right, and then finally, our takeaways to practice. So the first two, this becoming comfortable with change, learning to accept change. Like, change is hard, and we can learn to become more comfortable with change, because people, I think, have this idea that like, I'm either okay with change or I'm not, and that's just inherent in who I am. And we can absolutely learn to become more comfortable with uncertainty, with change, with practice. And if change really is something that feels really uncomfortable for you, giving yourself the chance of like, if I have a really set routine in my day, if I have if I eat the same things most of the time, or if I always like have my coffee on my way to work, can I just change up something, a little something about my routine to give myself the chance to just, even if I don't like it and I go back, to my normal thing tomorrow, giving ourselves the chance to just practice doing something a little different so that when things have to change, it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming. Understanding that everyone's needs in a dynamic ebb and flow. There are going to be times when you need more support than the person that you're interacting with. There are going to be times when they need more support. And understanding that there is always going to be that change, and recognizing that, like, if you are in a moment where you need more support, like, being able to acknowledge that is huge. And also being able to check in and being like, I know that I'm like having a little bit of a struggle right now, or that like this is going on. And I want to make sure that you know that I appreciate that. I'm noticing that I am needing more support right now, and I see that you're doing that. And then finally, finding outside and using outside support to help you navigate. So that might be like finding a therapist. We're therapists. We're always going to recommend therapy. Everyone, I have a therapist. I'm sure Sarah has a therapist. We're always going to think that that's a good idea. But that might also just be like making sure that you have people outside of your household that you are connecting with, so that you're not only like sitting in a very isolated little bubble, because it can just feel very suffocating if you don't have any other connections outside. And that can be absolutely still be virtual. It can still be, it can be an online community. It can be any kind of connection, but just kind of any place where you feel comfortable and safe and like understood is going to be helpful. And as you can never have too many of those. So any sort of outside support that feels genuine to you, making sure that you utilize that as well. Finally, I wanted to point out a resource as well that I didn't give earlier. But if you're thinking about this idea of connection versus alone time and finding that balance, and how do I figure that out? What does that look like for me? The Nagoski sisters, who are the ones who wrote Burnout, the really popular, well-known book from I think last year, the year before. They have a podcast called The Feminist Survival Project, and they have an entire episode about this idea called Too Much Connection. I would highly recommend it. Again, if hearing that you're just like, I don't even know how to start thinking about that, or I'm not even sure how to know what I need. That's also like a really good place to get some additional ideas. And they also have a lot of like concrete actionable steps as well.
I like what you're saying there. I'm going to go listen to that myself. And I like this last part where it's saying get outside support, because we try to teach this, and we try to practice this, is don't believe everything you think, right? We know that, but it's hard in the moment to remember it, that when it's tough, it's all the way tough. And when it's different, it's all the way different. And we think, and we like to think what we're thinking, but getting that outside support, whether if that's a phone call or you're going to the grocery store, it kind of shakes us up and reminds us that there's about a billion other ways to think about this very thing that I'm thinking right now. Or maybe I was so mad and then somebody says a few kind words to me and I'm like, oh, yeah, I should probably go back. I think I may have a little bit of a repair or an amend to make. So I really appreciate you adding that in, Tori. And I think this is a little place where we do a gear shift and invite questions
Question.
that may have been generated from anyone that's been listening.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you guys for sharing such great advice and insight. We do have two questions here. The first one is, how do we find something that is restorative to our relationship?
Wow. Yeah. Right, we can both take a chance at this. We can talk over each other if you want to. The question is, how do we find something that's restorative to our relationship? Well, I'm going to say there's probably the best approach I can think of is keep it really simple. Keep it small and keep it doable. So you can what I've advised people to do is somebody go over in this corner and write a list of things they like and or need, and this person go over and write, 5 things they like and or need, and then come back together and find something that's similar. It sounds so corny, but it's really true. I think when I'm facing somebody and they're interacting with me, it's hard for my brain to get reflective and actually go, wait, what was my North Star? What was something that I like doing or that I always wished I had done with my brother or my spouse, and that I want to make sure I do it. Those are, when I think about the word restorative, it's like I'm storing up. I'm really coming back to it. I'm bringing back something to that relationship that's important. Tori, what are your thoughts on it? Because that would be a simple
Yeah.
assignment, I would say, to get the ball rolling.
Absolutely. And what you said about that idea of like, sometimes when I'm looking someone face to face, that's when I lose all of my words. That is why so many good conversations happen in the car. Like there's legit, like the fact that we are both facing kind of, or like facing a common, but we are not facing each other. Like sometimes that can make people feel a little bit more comfortable. But I would say also, if you're looking for something that's restorative in your relationship, also reflecting back to the early days of your relationship. If we're talking within a romantic context, like there's a reason that you fell for each other. There's a reason that you're together and you enjoyed each other, or that wouldn't have happened. And going to the like, what did we used to do? What did we enjoy together? And where did we start? And can we bring something? If we used to, like we used to always go out to eat, or we used to go, like these are the things we used to do together and really enjoy in our earliest parts, where we were still in that really like high honeymoon phase, early days. And can we do some of those things again? Can we find the things that we loved about that? Was it because we were trying new things? Was it because it gave us something to like really start to talk about? What was it that we did? What did we like about it? And can we do something like that again?
I like that.
Yeah.
That was great. Yeah, thank you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to use either the chat or the Q&A button down below your screen. The second question is, how do I start the conversation around hard conversations? How do I do this with family, or does it even apply?
Wow. I have received some of this coaching myself, and I would offer this coaching to anyone listening. Is I would find it where there's not a lot of distraction going on. I would label what it is I'm about to do. So I would frame it. So there's a thing called framing, saying, look, I really need to talk with you. I think I want to do this for about 15, 20 minutes. It's likely going to be uncomfortable, so that we're telling the truth. And what we're doing is we're leading with the truth, and we're simultaneously being really gentle. So I'm presenting a gentle truth from the way I see it, which is all we really ever have. If I'm entering this with wanting to change somebody else's mind, I may already be failing. So I want to present what I'm perceiving, and I want to do it in a gentle, truthful way. Tori, what else do you have to add on to that? Because hard truths are usually our hard truth, may not be your hard truth. So
Absolutely. And I think something to really keep in mind is the idea that like in the best disagreements, the goal is not to prove to the other person that I'm right, or not to it is not me against you. It needs to be us against a problem. Like we need to be united in understanding what the problem is. So conflicts come from not being heard, not being understood. And like, so the first thing we need to do is understand each other, and we can both understand what is this problem, and being able to both like then turn around and be like, we are now both addressing this problem, not addressing each other as the problem. So making sure that we're really checking in and like understanding that as the goal, so that we're not walking in with, well, I need you to do this, and that is the only thing that's going to work for me. But instead being like, this is what I'm missing, or this is what I'm noticing. Are you noticing it too? Can you give me some thoughts? And can we find a middle ground? Can we find a place where we both feel really good about what we're doing next? That said, also being really aware of how does your partner best communicate? Because if, for some of us, myself included, when I get really nervous or I get anxious or I'm having a difficult conversation, my ability to like talk really decreases. So like for some people, maybe if you know that is true of your partner, doing a little communication beforehand of like, hey, I think like tonight I want to talk about this. Like, I want you to bring your thoughts, but like giving some people a chance to be able to like make sure they have their best way of communicating available to them can also be helpful.
I love what you just said. It reminded me of something that was really imparted to me a couple of years ago, which is sometimes we have to also pause.
Mhm.
And like literally, you referenced it earlier. I may have to get up and leave. And the big thing for me is like when I need 10 minutes, we just need to stop and I'll be back, right? Because that's what we know about that other person. That
Mhm.
could be our child. It could be like our relative. It could be somebody we adore and love. And if that's what they need, I think the work is to not judge it, but to really say, got it. And you told me you'll be back.
Mhm.
So that's a big core component. I love that. Thank you, Tori.
Mhm.
All right. We have another question. Any advice for those who want to be in a long-lasting relationship but are uncomfortable using those dating apps? It's so hard to meet people, especially with COVID.
Tori, start it. You go ahead.
Oof. One, you're absolutely right. It is incredibly difficult in the times of COVID. Um, and I will say that the best advice is still true is one, making sure that you are building a life around you that feels really fulfilling and sustaining. And like as you are doing that, the connections that you're going to be making are going to be more likely to be people whose lives align with yours. So, that idea of like, if you are really involved or like really passionate about a specific kind of, charity work or like social justice stuff or, like volunteering with animals or whatever it is that is this thing that you are passionate about, the more that you become kind of involved in that community and meet other people who share those same passions, the more likely you are to be able to find someone who your like I said, your goals and your life kind of style aligns with theirs. Um, Easier said than done in times of COVID, but I also think that kind of secondhand connections are helpful as well. Of like the people around you that you keep around you are around you for a reason, and giving yourself the chance to like expand the circle from kind of your own, like, your friends, and expanding into their friends can sometimes be helpful in terms of, again, finding people who already you're starting off with commonalities and starting off with a sense of like shared understanding. Um, that said, meeting people in person when so many meetings and activities and things like that are still on Zoom is very, very difficult. And you may find connections that way anyway, because absolutely, if you're in kind of a book club or in a thing and you're finding yourself really agreeing or really interested in what somebody is saying, connecting with that person even completely outside of a romantic context is never going to be a bad idea. And if we continue to do that, eventually romantic context will happen somewhere. And like I said, that said, it is very, very difficult.
It totally is. So I want to say something dialectically opposed.
Mm-hmm.
Two things are very separate and they can be simultaneously true. To add to what Tori just said, I'm going to say that my sort of thinking around this is like, number one, go slow so you can go fast. Give yourself plenty of time. And then on the other side, it's like sort of when a door opens, walk through it. And on the balance of it, think about the first slides we talked about. This is a stressful time. Things are compressed and they're not what we're used to. Sometimes when things are compressed, and we're stressed, we actually don't make the best decisions. So that's where I'm saying go slow so you can go fast. Think about the whole context of what's happening for you and what you're pressed up against, and whose hand you might want to be holding and pressing against yours. And on the other side, it's also not shying away from opportunities. But I think this is a time that if there's ever a place and a time to be tender and maybe even tentative, and also really attending to ourselves, noticing ourselves, this is it. This is it. Because we could, as we can, we could just be making some decisions under duress and stress that we might regret later. So go slow so you can go fast. And I think we might be getting really close to, oh my word, that is like, it's, we're done. I mean, we're out of time. We went actually over the time we thought we'd have. Are there more questions for us?
Yeah, if there's any other last minute questions, feel free to send them now using the Q&A or the chat. But other than that, those are the questions that we have for tonight's presentation.
All right.
Okay.
Excellent.
Well, it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with Tori and doing this and thinking it through. And it actually made me have some thoughts. I'm like, that's pretty good. I like what Tori said. I'm going to, now when we get off screen, I'm going to write down really quickly some of the tips she gave.
All right. Well, that's it then. Thank you everyone for attending. As we said earlier, at the beginning of this presentation, the recording will be available most likely by next week. And then we'll let you guys know when that is live and ready for viewing. All right. Well, thank you everyone. Thank you again, Sarah and Tori. Have a good night.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.